You blocked an ambulance, Marjorie, an ambulance. My daughter could have died and you're worried about gravel aesthetics? That's the first thing I said, no filter, no breathing room, when I stepped out of my house and saw the red and blue lights flashing behind a makeshift decorative median the HOA had dumped across the only access road. Sirens screaming, EMTs waving helplessly, my daughter inside convulsing from a seizure, and Marjorie Kellerman? She was standing there smug as a statue, sipping from her HOA-issued thermos, like it was just another Tuesday. I'm Caleb Madsen, former firefighter, full-time EMT, and father to the strongest 12-year-old girl you'll never meet. Her name's Ella, and after that day, I made a promise. If they wouldn't let emergency help reach my daughter, then I'd make sure help could fly straight to her. Before we dive into this mess, I've got a question for you. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare of your own, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see how this ends. Now let me take you back to where this started. Not with the ambulance, not with the blockade, but with something simpler, quieter. My house sits on a little patch of land just outside of Glen Ridge, Arizona. It's not fancy, just a single-story brick home wrapped in cedar with a metal-roofed shed out back and a bent weather vane shaped like an old biplane. That vane, it was my dad's. He installed it the day I came home from the hospital after I was born. Said I'd arrived like a storm on a runway. It creaks like hell in the wind, but I never oiled it. That sound, it was part of the rhythm of this place, same as my father's fire boots still sitting by the back door, same as Ella's giggle echoing down the hallway when she was younger and didn't have to worry about medications or triggers. This house, this land, it's more than dirt and timber. It's blood. It's memory. It's the last real thing I have from both my father and my mother, who passed 2 years ago. She planted every tree in our side yard with handwritten markers. There's a maple by the driveway, and under it is a rusted metal box. I haven't opened it in years, but I know what's in there. Notes, receipts, and one little drawing of a helipad sketched in her careful cursive. Crazy, right? Right? Back then, she thought we might need one, just in case. She said, better to be called crazy than to be called too late. Marjorie didn't understand any of that. She didn't care. Her war against us started small. A warning letter for my mailbox not matching the neighborhood aesthetic. A fine for my truck parked half an inch over the curb. Then came the complaints about Ella's medical ramp, violating symmetry, and the boulders she had dumped at the cul-de-sac entrance to enhance community appeal. But the thing that lit the match? It wasn't her latest letter. It wasn't even the citation for excessive gravel noise. What does that even mean? No, it was standing helpless at my own gate, hearing my daughter seize inside while the ambulance lights just blinked like useless ornaments in the dark. I ran. I carried Ella out myself, arms trembling, heart pounding, over those decorative boulders like some stupid obstacle course. Her eyes rolled back. She couldn't even cry. My boots slipped, tore the knees of my jeans, and I barely noticed. Every second I thought, this is the second she might not come back. We got her to the ER, she stabilized, but something in me didn't. That night, I stood outside in the backyard, looking up at that old rusted weather vane creaking in the desert breeze. I could feel my dad there. I could feel my mom. I remembered that drawing, that box, that sketch of a helipad. That was the moment I stopped reacting and started planning. You see, they built their rules like a wall, but I was never one to knock. I climb, and if they blocked the roads, then I'd come from the sky. I stood under that weather vane until the wind went still. I hadn't even changed out of my blood-streaked shirt from the hospital run. Didn't need to. That stain, that moment, it clarified everything. So I walked back inside, sat at the kitchen table with the old ranch deed in one hand and the HOA violation letter in the other. One was a promise, the other was a power trip, and I was done pretending the two could coexist. The next morning, I pulled every HOA document from the junk drawer I'd been stuffing them into for the past year. A stack of envelopes, each more ridiculous than the last. Unsanctioned paint tone, non-compliant light fixture, illegal emergency ramp curvature. Illegal curvature for a wheelchair ramp. I laid them out like evidence, not for a court, not yet, but for me. I needed to see the pattern, and it was clear. Marjorie wasn't enforcing order. She was conducting a slow siege. And I let her. See, I didn't fight back before, because I thought I was being the bigger man. I thought if I just played along, kept things calm, eventually she'd move on. She never did. I'd been raised with values: respect your neighbors, stay civil, don't pick fights over nonsense. But Marjorie, she weaponized nonsense. She knew how to twist bylaws like piano wire. She knew how to smile while crushing your breath with a technicality. And the worst part, most people let her. The HOA meetings were always sparsely attended. Just Marjorie, her 2 hand-picked board members, and a few retirees sipping lukewarm coffee. Everyone else had jobs, kids, lives. They didn't have time to argue over flagpole heights or shrub angles. That was her advantage, bureaucracy as a blade. But what she didn't know, what she never bothered to learn, was that I wasn't just some paramedic with a rusted truck and a yard full of tools. I knew fire code, I knew zoning limits, I knew how to read city planning documents and spot loopholes buried like ticks under vague sentences. Because before I was a firefighter, before I wore a badge and boots, I spent 2 years as a county planner's assistant. It wasn't glamorous, but it taught me where the cracks in the system lived. And now, I was going spelunking. I pulled out my laptop, dug up the original bylaws, scanned them side by side with Marjorie's recent amendments, and there it was, small, quiet, legal graffiti. A last-minute clause about vehicular easement redirection for aesthetic upgrades, dated 2 weeks after the ambulance debacle. She rewrote the rules, after the fact, to justify blocking medical access, and her board rubber-stamped it. I took a breath, then opened a new folder on my desktop, named it Skyway_Operation. This wasn't about petty revenge. This was about never being at someone's mercy again. And to do that, I needed leverage. That's when I remembered the county assessor's map. My father had scribbled something on it years ago. Something about backline easement, aerial access exempt. It meant nothing to me as a teenager. But now, it sounded like gold. The paper was probably in one of the old metal cabinets in the shed, the same place he stored his maps, fire logs, and that ancient CB radio he refused to toss out. But before I could go hunting, I got a knock at the door. It was Tyler Brome. Now, Tyler and I had history. We'd played baseball together in high school. He was always quiet, the kind of guy who apologized before stealing second. He ended up working in accounting, married young, 2 kids, then divorced, moved back to the neighborhood after his mom passed. And somewhere along the way, he landed a seat on the HOA board as treasurer. I opened the door halfway. Tyler, "Hey, Caleb, just doing a quick check-in on some upcoming votes, routine stuff." He held up a clipboard but didn't look me in the eye. I leaned against the doorframe. "Routine, huh? Like rerouting emergency access?" He froze, gripped the pen tighter, then forced a chuckle. "Hey, I just tally the votes, man. I don't write the proposals." "That's not what your signature says on the amendment." He didn't reply, just adjusted his collar and shifted on his feet. The pen trembled slightly in his hand. "I've got work to do," I said, and shut the door. Behind me, Ella's tablet played a soft cartoon jingle. She was safe, for now. But this wasn't over. Marjorie rewrote the rules to trap us. I was going to rewrite the ending. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening, 6 p.m. sharp, inside the Glenridge Community Center. Just past the rose bushes, between the 2 fake colonial columns Marjorie had insisted on installing last spring. I knew I had to show up. Not because I thought it would fix anything, but because I wanted them to see my face when they tried to lie. I left Ella with her Aunt Marie and drove over with a file folder tucked under my arm. Inside, printed screenshots of the time-stamped amendment, a city fire access guideline, and a copy of the HOA's own bylaws from 3 years ago, before Marjorie put her fingers on them. I parked in the far corner of the lot, watched as a few familiar faces trickled in. Retired neighbors mostly, folks who avoided drama unless it showed up with a clipboard and a ballot box. Tyler was already inside when I walked through the doors. "Meeting starts now," Marjorie said, tapping her watch as if I'd interrupted her dinner. She wore that signature cream blazer, hair pinned tight in a spiral bun that could cut glass, the kind of woman who never raised her voice but could humiliate you with a single eyebrow. The moment I took my seat near the back, her eyes found me. "Mr. Madsen," she said, lips pursed, This is a board meeting, not a grievance hearing. If you have complaints, there's a form for that." I didn't blink. "And if I have evidence of procedural fraud, is there a form for that too?" A low murmur ran through the retirees. Tyler, visibly tensed at the corner of the folding table, fidgeting with the plastic seal on his water bottle. "I'm not here to cause trouble," I continued, standing up slowly. "But I am here to make sure we all know what really happened the night emergency access was blocked." Marjorie tilted her head. "You mean the safety upgrades to the cul-de-sac?" I opened the folder and laid the time-stamped documents on the edge of the table. "This amendment," I said, "was filed on June 9th. The ambulance incident happened May 31st. That means you wrote the rules after the fact and backdated them. That's not safety, that's cover-up." A heavy silence filled the room. Someone near the door coughed. Marjorie didn't even flinch. "You're making assumptions, Mr. Madsen," she said. "The board approved that upgrade unanimously." My eyes moved to Tyler. "Is that right?" He blinked, just once. His fingers tightened around the pen in his hand. Then, nothing. Marjorie answered for him. "Tyler confirmed the vote. We have the signatures on record." But Tyler didn't speak. He looked down, stayed down. "I just want the truth on record," I said, "because if you think I'm letting you gamble with my daughter's life again, you're wrong." "Are you threatening the board, Mr. Madsen?" I laughed. Not out of humor, out of the sheer audacity of it. "I'm telling you, I'm done playing quiet. You don't get to barricade my family and then hide behind bylaws you doctored with a ballpoint pen." The room shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. People started whispering. One older man whispered to his wife, then raised an eyebrow toward Marjorie. She rapped the gavel once on the table. "This meeting is adjourned. Any further accusations will be addressed via legal counsel." I didn't move. Neither did Tyler. But as I turned to leave, I caught something. Just for a second. Tyler's eyes on mine. A flash of regret, and a whisper so faint I almost missed it. I didn't know it would go that far. That was the first crack. When I got home, Ella was asleep on the couch, bundled in her grandmother's quilt. I stepped outside into the desert dusk and listened to the creak of the weather vane. The breeze had returned, carrying dust and memory in equal measure. That night, I didn't sleep. I opened every drawer in the shed, every cabinet, every old metal box. Somewhere buried in there was that map. My father's scribbled notations about aerial easement and access. Marjorie thought the boardroom was her battlefield. She forgot I'd been trained in real emergencies. And this time I was going to treat it like one. The morning after the board meeting, I drove out to the county clerk's office before the sun had a chance to burn off the fog. I wasn't looking for a confrontation. I was looking for leverage. While most people saw zoning ordinances as dry government filler, I saw blueprints for a battlefield, and this time I wanted to know every square inch of mine. The clerk, an older guy named Dennis, remembered my father. "Fire Marshal Madsen," he said, handing me a brittle stack of parcel maps. "Man never lost a boundary dispute." I smiled. Let's hope the sun can keep the streak alive. I spent the next 2 hours poring over documents, setback lines, emergency access policies, archived aerial rights, and then I found it. A 1992 addendum tied to my grandfather's deed. It was short, barely 4 lines, but it was everything I needed. Airspace above property line designated for private emergency use, exempt from subdivision obstruction clause unless formally repealed by county ordinance. It had been grandfathered in. Not just a right to build, a right to fly. When I stepped out of the clerk's office, the air felt lighter, not because the fight was over, but because now I wasn't swinging in the dark anymore. Back home, I tucked the copy of the clause into a weatherproof folder and dropped it into the fireproof box under my bed. One more piece of the plan locked into place. But Marjorie wasn't resting either. That afternoon, I spotted a new sign posted at the entry of the neighborhood. Private Traffic Enforcement Zone, Emergency Vehicle Access, subject to HOA, discretion. Subject to discretion, her weapon of choice. I drove straight to the sheriff's substation. Deputy Lana Hart sat behind the desk, boots propped up on a file drawer, reading a traffic citation with the kind of tired face only small-town law enforcement wore. She glanced up when I walked in. "Let me guess, HOA war? More like HOA militia?" I laid the photos on her desk, the new sign, the backdated amendment, the deed clause. She whistled. Well, damn, you've got a stronger case file than half my deputies manage in a month. Can you do anything? She leaned forward, dropped her feet. Technically, not unless there's a criminal infraction. But I can pass this to county code enforcement, and I can sure as hell document everything. You'll want that trail if this ends up in front of a judge. Thanks. I'm not looking for a badge to save me, just a paper trail that backs me up when I make my move. She studied me. What's your endgame, Madsen? I paused. Altitude. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't press. Back in the truck, I sat there for a minute, watching the world move normal around me. Joggers, mail trucks, a kid riding past on a scooter, and then my phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. Can we talk, just us? I stared at the screen. Half of me wanted to ignore it, but the other half, the half that saw his hands shake during the board meeting, knew I couldn't. We met that evening behind the old neighborhood playground, away from the houses, in the shadow of the old, rusting swing set. He didn't say anything at first, just handed me a folded page. It was a draft proposal. Permanent restrictions on private air transit installation, authored by Marjorie, scheduled for vote next month. She's trying to shut the sky now, I muttered. Tyler nodded. She thinks you're bluffing. And you, still tallying votes? His shoulders slumped. I didn't sign this one. I can't. I've got kids, Caleb. What happens when she blocks an ambulance for someone else? I looked at him carefully, the same guy who once apologized for winning chess. You want out? He nodded. I want it right. Then help me. We shook hands. That night, I pulled out the old blueprint paper from my dad's drawer, the same stuff he used to sketch out fire escape drills for the station. I pinned it to the garage wall, measured twice. It wasn't just a drawing. It was the beginning of a landing pad. The blueprint paper was old, faded around the edges, brittle as dried leaves. I traced the pencil lines with my finger, following my dad's strokes like they were a map to something buried beneath the surface. But I needed more than lines and memories. I needed legal proof, technical specifications, something that could force their hand before Marjorie's air restriction vote locked me out of the sky. That night, after Ella was asleep and the cicadas started up their nightly sermon, I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the shed. It wasn't just a tool shed, it was a time capsule. My dad's handwriting was still scrawled on the pegboard labels, wrenches, not these ons, in thick black Sharpie. The floor creaked, just like it did when I was 10, sneaking out here to hide after breaking the porch light. But now I wasn't hiding. The cabinet I was looking for stood in the far corner, rusted gray, 4 drawers, 1 padlocked. I hadn't touched it since he passed. I knelt down, ran my hand along the top edge until I felt the familiar chip in the metal, a tiny magnetic key stuck just behind the hinge. Dad always said if someone's determined to find it, they earned it. The lock clicked. The drawer groaned open. Inside, blueprints, rolled, bundled, tagged with masking tape, labels in my dad's messy cursive. Evac setup Station B, roof vent clearance, Heli Evac V1. That last one stopped me cold. I unrolled it on the workbench under the old hanging bulb, the light flickering just enough to give everything a ghostly twitch. The paper smelled like dust and ink and oil. But what caught my eye wasn't the sketch of the helipad. It was the note attached. Filed 2005, FAA Form 7481. Accepted. Use only in emergencies. Don't let anyone tell you you don't have the right to protect your own. His signature was at the bottom. Fire Marshal Robert Madsen. I stared at it, throat tight. My father never said much about it. Not directly. He just always said, the skies are free to those who care enough to keep them that way. This wasn't just a drawing. This was registration. This was history. And it was legally binding. I slid the blueprint into a plastic sleeve and tucked it into the weatherproof folder with the parcel clause and photos. My arsenal was growing. But that wasn't all. Digging deeper, I found a thin, leather-bound ledger wedged between 2 empty blueprint tubes. Inside were call logs, handwritten incident reports, even a section marked unauthorized interference, HOA encroachments. One entry, dated July 2003, detailed a dispute between my father and Glen Ridge's HOA predecessor, back when they'd tried to beautify the West Trail with a gate. He'd won, quietly, with paperwork. He left a line at the end. Win in silence. Make the noise with results. I turned off the flashlight and sat in the silence. No grand speech, no sudden soundtrack. Just the hum of the bulb, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, and the quiet certainty that I had what I needed. The next morning, I called Deputy Hart. "I found something," I said. "You're speaking in that about to rock someone's world voice again," she said dryly. "It's FAA registered, my dad filed it, we have a right to build a helipad." Pause. "You serious?" "Dead." She whistled through her teeth. "All right. I'll get you a verification link from the FAA records archive. You'll want that ready if this turns into a circus." "It's already a circus," I said. "I'm just building the tent now." That afternoon, I drove past Marjorie's house. She stood on her porch with a coffee mug in hand, watching me like a hawk eyeing a fox. She smiled, that tight, practiced HOA smile that said she believed she was still in control. She didn't know what I'd found. She didn't know the air above my land had already been claimed, long before she ever picked up her first gavel. 2 days after I found the FAA registration, I returned to the old maple tree near the driveway, the one my mom planted the year Ella was born. Its roots were thick now, pushing up the bricks slightly, like the land was trying to remind me that nothing buried stays quiet forever. Beneath it was the rusted metal box I hadn't touched in over a decade. A part of me was afraid to open it, like cracking the seal would stir up more than just old paper. But I knelt anyway and brushed the dirt off the lid. The hinges protested with a shriek as I pried it open. Inside were letters. Mom's handwriting was still the same, soft, round loops that looked like they'd been drawn with patience. One letter was addressed to me, yellowed at the corners but still sealed. I unfolded it slowly. "If you're reading this, it means the land's being threatened again. Your father and I built more than a house here. We built a way out. Don't let someone with a clipboard and a fake smile erase that. Use the air, Caleb. It's yours. Always was." She'd included a drawing, not just of the helipad, but of our house from above. Our shed, the firewood stack, the weather vane casting a long shadow like a compass needle. Her version of a legacy. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hit me, but because there wasn't time. I walked inside, hung the letter on the corkboard above the kitchen sink, and called Tyler. He picked up on the third ring. "Tell me you've got something." "I've got a registered FAA document dated before Marjorie ever moved in. I've got zoning rights, and I've got a blueprint with my dad's name on it." He exhaled hard. "She's ramping up, wants to push through the airspace vote next week. Quietly. Just 3 board signatures and it's locked. Then we need to make some noise." "You're really going through with this?" he asked. "I'm not just building a pad. I'm building proof." He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "I'll be there when the trucks come in." That night, I marked the landing zone behind the shed. No drama, no announcements, just quiet, measuring tape under floodlight, strings stretched taut from peg to peg. The next morning, Marjorie sent 2 HOA agents to inspect my property line. They stood at the edge of my yard like vultures in polo shirts, one of them snapping photos with his phone. I walked out, binder in hand. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" One cleared his throat. "We're conducting a visual compliance check." "For what?" "An authorized ground excavation." I flipped open the binder. FAA Form 7481. County Parcel Clause, Emergency Exemption Notarized. "Would you like to take a copy back to your queen?" They left without a word. Ella watched it all from the window. When I came back in, she asked, "Are they going to take our house?" "No," I said. "They're going to take a step back." She nodded slowly, then pointed to the corkboard. "That's Grandma's letter?" "Yeah. He always liked flying things." I ruffled her hair. "So do we." The concrete truck arrived 3 days later. I had every permit printed and ready. Tyler showed up wearing jeans and a baseball cap, keeping his head low but helping me guide the layout stakes into the ground. "Now you realize she's going to lose it when this dries," he said. She already lost, she just hasn't heard the verdict yet. As the cement poured and the base took shape, I felt something shift, not in the ground, but in me. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even rebellion. It was restoration. The blueprint, the weather vane, the maple tree, all of it was part of the same message. We weren't trespassing on HOA property. They were trespassing on our history. The concrete was still curing when the summons landed on my doorstep. Certified letter, HOA header, sealed with that same smug insignia, preserving Glenridge pride. I sliced it open with the corner of the binder that held my FAA docs like I was gutting a fish. You are hereby notified that your unauthorized construction violates Glenridge Covenant 6 B19. Failure to cease activity will result in legal escalation. It was signed by all 3 board members, except Tyler. I texted him, "You left your name off. Intentional?" He replied with a single word, "Garage." I found him waiting that night, hands shoved in his pockets, standing in the glow of a single bare bulb above my tool bench. He looked smaller somehow, like the guilt had been weighing down his spine. "I can't be part of this anymore," he said before I could ask. "I figured," I said. "You didn't sign." He nodded. "Marjorie tried to make me. Brought the form to my house. Told me if I didn't back her, she'd leak my old mortgage default to the board." I tilted my head. "That was years ago. You cleared it." "She doesn't care. It's about obedience, not facts." He reached into his coat and pulled out a USB drive. "What's that?" "Footage, meeting from 2 months ago. I always record them, habit from work. Usually I delete them after the minutes are filed, but this one I kept." He didn't say why. He didn't need to. I slid it into my laptop, pulled up the file. There she was, Marjorie, sitting tall at the head of the table, a legal pad in front of her and a glass of white wine in hand. "Look," she said in the recording, "if we beautify the entrance and it just so happens to delay an emergency vehicle or two, that's not our fault. It's poor city planning. We're just enforcing our rights." Another voice, Doug something, one of the board guys, laughed nervously. "But the Madsons have a sick kid, don't they?" She didn't even blink. "Then maybe they should move." I paused the video. The silence in my garage was thicker than concrete. Tyler wouldn't meet my eyes. I should have said something sooner. "You did now," I said quietly, "and that's what counts." He turned to leave, but stopped at the doorway. "She's holding a special meeting next week. Emergency vote to pass the air restriction clause before your pad finishes. Says she's nipping the nonsense in the bud. Then it's time the nonsense bites back." The next morning, I emailed a copy of the recording to Deputy Hart. Her reply came within the hour. "Well, damn, this is gold. Let me check with our legal folks. Don't post it yet, trust me." I trusted her, but I didn't wait. I printed a transcript, highlighted the quote in neon yellow, folded it twice and walked door to door that afternoon, slipping it into mailboxes with a note, "This is who's representing you." It wasn't an expose, it was a mirror. And it didn't take long to crack the image. By sundown, a neighbor I barely knew, Mrs. Patel, who once yelled at me over a Halloween decoration, came by with tears in her eyes. "I didn't know," she said. "I just thought you were making trouble." I was, but only after they made the mistake of thinking they could endanger my daughter and get away with it. The helipad base was dry now. I stood on it that night, staring up at the stars. Ella came out in her hoodie, barefoot and sleepy-eyed, and asked, "Is this where they'll land?" "Yeah," I said. "Is it big enough?" I smiled. "It'll hold anything that comes down to help you." She looked up. "Do they have lights underneath?" "It might do." "Can I pick the color?" "Sure." She pointed. "Blue, like Grandma's weather vane." And just like that, the legacy wasn't just mine anymore. It was hers too. I spent the next day finishing the helipad's perimeter, painted the circle myself, 3 coats of aviation-grade white. In the center, I added one extra touch. Just under the hemp, a tiny blue arrow pointing north. Ella's idea. "Like the weather vane," she said, "so they know where to land and where we came from." It wasn't just paint, it was defiance, in broad daylight. While the brush dried, I opened a new folder on my laptop, counter_protocol. The clock was ticking. Marjorie's emergency vote was set for Friday, and I knew she'd do it behind closed doors unless I forced the door wide open. I sent a request to the FAA records office for a scanned copy of the 2005 approval. Hart said the document would hold weight in court, but having the agency send it directly would bulletproof my case. Then I dug into the HOA bylaws again. Section 4311, Special Votes. It said any emergency meeting must provide members a 72-hour notice and allow public comment. So I crafted my letter, firm, polite, legally saturated, and hand-delivered it to every board member's mailbox. Consider this formal notice that I will be present at Friday's vote. Per HOA Section 4.31, this meeting must be open to public input and properly recorded. I signed it, attached a copy of the FAA pre-approval, and added a quote from the County Zoning Commission confirming emergency use air rights. Tyler texted me that night. They're panicking. Marjorie's trying to cancel the meeting. Call it a clerical mistake. Let her try, I replied. I'll hold the meeting myself if I have to. The next morning, I took it public. They all posted a photo of the helipad on our local neighborhood app, captioned, "When the road gets blocked, the sky becomes a solution. FAA registered, legally sound, and built with family in mind. Ask me why." Within hours, the comments section exploded. Some accused me of disrupting the peace. Others cheered me on. But what mattered most was the DM I got from Mrs. Alvarez, one of the older residents who hadn't left her house since her husband passed. "Thank you," she wrote. "You're doing what we were all too scared to do, standing up." I didn't need applause, I needed support, but seeing those words reminded me I wasn't alone in this anymore. That evening I stopped by Deputy Hart's office to drop off a printed transcript of Marjorie's recorded quote, just in case. She looked up from her desk and grinned. "You know, if you ever get tired of saving people from heart attacks, you'd make one hell of a paralegal." I shrugged. I've got motivation. As I left, she called after me. "Don't forget, record Friday, every second. These people fold under light." Friday came fast. Tyler called that morning. "Board's trying to switch venues last minute, from the community center to Marjorie's front porch." "Perfect," I said. "More witnesses." I showed up 5 minutes early, not to her porch, but with a portable PA system set up across the street on public sidewalk. Lawn chairs appeared. So did neighbors, even the ones who had never cared before. I brought printed handouts. FAA documents, meeting transcripts, HOA bylaws with every critical line highlighted in bold yellow. When Marjorie stepped out onto her porch, sunglasses on, clipboard in hand, she froze. 30 people stood across the street, watching her like a court gallery waiting for testimony. She started to speak, but I beat her to it. "Just a reminder," I said through the mic, calm and clear. "This is an open meeting. Anything said here is being recorded. Any vote conducted without quorum or due notice will be challenged under Article 7, and I have legal counsel on standby." She adjusted her sunglasses, smiled, but her knuckles on the clipboard were pale white. The show was beginning. She just didn't realize yet she wasn't running it anymore. Marjorie stepped onto her porch like she was walking into a courtroom. Chin up, blazer pressed, clipboard clutched like a gavel. But this wasn't the HOA board she was used to controlling. This was neighbors, witnesses, and she didn't own them. She adjusted the mic clipped to her collar, trying to control the optics, but her voice cracked the moment she spoke. "This emergency session was called to address an unauthorized structure that may present liability to the neighborhood." I raised my hand. "Point of order, this structure is FAA certified and built on private land. The only liability is your refusal to acknowledge legal boundaries." A few people clapped. She flinched. "I'd ask that all disruptive commentary cease," she snapped, but the heat was rising. She could feel it. The old tactics weren't working here, not with cameras rolling and 30 sets of eyes watching every blink. Doug, the board secretary, cleared his throat beside her. "We should, maybe, review the bylaws again before moving forward with this vote." She turned slowly toward him, the kind of turn that said, "You'll regret that," but it was too late. Tyler stepped forward, not from the porch, but from the crowd. He didn't say a word, just held up the transcript. The crowd leaned in. Whispers spread like brush fire. "You said they should move," someone called out. "You said it on tape." Marjorie's eyes darted toward me. "This is character assassination. You don't know what I meant." "I know exactly what you meant," I said. "And so does my daughter." She tried to pivot. You think this helipad is about safety, but it's about spectacle. You're exploiting a tragedy for your own vanity project. That was the moment I stepped forward. I carried my daughter over your decorative boulders while she seized in my arms. I had to choose between her life and your landscape plan. You don't get to talk to me about vanity. No one moved. No one breathed. Then someone, Mrs. Patel, softly muttered, "Shameful." They cracked something. One by one, the crowd shifted, chairs scraped, heads shook. Marjorie looked around and realized for the first time she wasn't feared. She was outnumbered. She tried one last desperate swipe. "We are now moving to vote. All in favor of Emergency Clause 18B, restricting unauthorized aircraft access, raise your hand." Doug hesitated. Tyler didn't move. She was alone. "Motion fails," I said. "No quorum, no support." She slammed her clipboard shut. "This meeting is over." I stepped aside as she stormed past. She brushed my shoulder, but I didn't move. "See you soon," I said calmly. Later that night, I got a knock at the door. It was Tyler. "I'm resigning tomorrow," he said. "I should have done it sooner." "You did what mattered," I replied. He handed me a sealed envelope. "This is every amendment she pushed through in the past 2 years. A lot of it is procedural garbage, but some of it's worth looking at." I took the envelope. "You staying in the neighborhood?" He nodded, "But this time, I'm siding with the people who actually live here." When he left, I walked out to the helipad again. The paint had cured fully now. That tiny blue arrow Ella picked glowed under the porch light. For a moment, I stood in silence. Not the kind of silence Marjorie used to control meetings. The kind that follows a shift, like the air finally decided whose side it was on. Inside, Ella was asleep on the couch, curled beneath her grandma's quilt, the same one my mom had sewn years ago, stitched corners worn thin from every wash. I looked at her and thought, she'll never have to carry anyone over boulders. She'd have access, safety, options. And Marjorie? She finally understood what it felt like to have the ground pulled out from under her. 3 days after Marjorie's vote crumbled, the first aircraft landed. It wasn't a full-blown emergency, just a test run, a training flyover coordinated with a friend of mine from my firefighting days. Brian Feldman, medevac pilot turned logistics consultant. He owed me a favor. Said if I ever needed to drop in loud, he'd bring the rotor blade. We picked Friday at 4:30 p.m. No fanfare, no invitations, but I knew word had gotten out. By 4:15, I noticed cars slowing near the curb, phones aimed over dashboards. A couple neighbors stood near the sidewalk pretending to water plants. One guy across the street had dragged a lawn chair out to fix his mailbox. Ella sat on the porch steps in her favorite hoodie, headphones pulled halfway down. She looked up at me. "Is it happening?" I nodded. "You'll hear it before you see it." She stood up and grinned. "Cool!" And then it came. The distant whoomp, whoomp, whoomp that started in the sky and rolled over the roofs like a heartbeat. Marjorie's blinds across the street twitched. The chopper crested the hill like something out of a movie. Matte gray, not flashy but built for business. It looped once, then slowed into a hover, blades slicing clean air above our yard. The landing was smooth, textbook. Dust kicked up in a polite circle, the blue arrow Ella picked pointing true beneath the belly of the beast. When the skids hit the pad, the street fell completely silent. Brian stepped out, gave me a crisp nod, then held out a laminated folder. FAA visual confirmation, altitude compliance, flight plan logged and approved. I took it and laughed under my breath. "You always this formal?" "Only when I know there's an audience." I looked around. 10 people now stood across the street. Marjorie at her window, Tyler leaning on his fence with crossed arms and a crooked smile. "Want to say hi to the pilot?" I asked Ella. She nodded and jogged toward the pad, her hair pulled back and bouncing with every step. Brian knelt, gave her a quick high five, then pointed to the cockpit. "She can sit inside," he said. "Just no buttons." She gasped. "Really?" I nodded. "Go ahead." She climbed in, eyes wide, fingers gently touching every control without pushing a single one. I stepped back and watched. This wasn't about just proving a point anymore. It was about showing them, showing her, that we didn't need permission to protect ourselves. Brian fired the rotors again 10 minutes later. Ella stepped back with her hoodie pulled up and eyes full of awe. The chopper lifted slowly, paused in the air, and tilted as if to salute the little girl waving beneath it. Then it vanished beyond the ridge. As the last of the sound faded, someone across the street clapped. Then another, and another. It wasn't loud, it wasn't a standing ovation, but it was enough. The next day, I found an envelope taped to my front door. Inside, a handwritten note. I still don't like you, but I understand now. M. Kellerman. There was no return address, no apology, just that single sentence. From her, that was practically a full confession. I stuck it on the fridge, not as a trophy, but as proof that sometimes the loudest change starts with someone watching from behind blinds. Later, Ella helped me plant a new tree next to the helipad, a sapling maple. "Feel this one?" she asked, and smiled. "Because it'll grow fast, and someday you'll look at it and remember the day the sky came down to meet you." We watered it together. Then we stood back and looked at the yard. Not a battlefield anymore, just a home that refused to bow. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Held back at the Glenridge Community Center, where it should have been all along. Marjorie didn't get to hand-pick her porch as the courtroom this time. Too many neighbors had questions. Too many had seen the chopper. Too many had read the transcript. And now too many wanted answers. I arrived early and took a seat in the front row. Not to grandstand, just to make sure she saw me when she walked in. Ella stayed home with Aunt Marie. I didn't need her to watch this part. This wasn't about hope or helicopters anymore. This was about consequence. Marjorie entered with her usual tight-lipped poise, clipboard pressed to her chest like armor. But even she couldn't ignore the room. People standing along the back wall, couples holding hands, even a few teenagers recording on their phones. Tyler sat at the board's folding table, but not in a board seat. He sat one row behind it, like a man who'd stepped out of the shadows and finally found sunlight. Doug, still technically board secretary, cleared his throat. "We'll begin with old business." Marjorie interrupted. "No, we'll begin with the matter of the helipad. Mr. Madsen's unauthorized construction continues to present a liability to our neighborhood and our insurance policy." I stood. "My construction is FAA approved, registered, legally documented. You've had those files for weeks." "You've ignored the aesthetic guidelines of Glenridge," she replied. "And you've ignored the safety guidelines of basic human decency." Gasps. A few murmurs. Marjorie pressed on. "The HOA exists to uphold standards. When a homeowner acts unilaterally, it undermines our system of shared values." "You mean your system of silence?" Doug shifted in his seat. I walked to the center of the room and set a small Bluetooth speaker on the floor. Pressed play. Marjorie's voice filled the room from the recording Tyler had given me. "If we beautify the entrance and it delays an emergency vehicle or two, that's not our fault. Maybe they should move." Silence. Then, shuffling. Whispers. A slow burn of disapproval. Marjorie's jaw tightened. "That recording is out of context." Tyler stood. "No, it's exactly in context. And I was there." All eyes shifted to him. "She told us to rewrite vote logs. She told me to erase timestamps. I kept quiet. I was wrong, but not anymore." Doug stood next. "I withdraw support for any actions taken against the Madsen property, and I motion to suspend Marjorie Kellerman from her duties pending a full review." She laughed. Dry, hollow. "You can't suspend me. I founded this HOA." "You also weaponized it," I said. From the back, Mrs. Patel raised her voice. "My grandson has asthma. You blocked the only path a fire truck could have used last summer. He had an attack. We had to carry him 2 blocks. One voice after another followed. I was fined for wind chimes. She threatened to have my dog removed. She posted a photo of my lawn online. I'm done being afraid of her. Marjorie's face lost color. The clipboard slipped slightly from her hand. Tyler walked up, placed a folded sheet of paper on the board table. My formal resignation. I'll be joining the community oversight team instead, and I'll be recommending we dismantle this board until a democratic election can be held. Doug nodded, seconded. I didn't speak again. I didn't need to. The crowd said everything. Marjorie turned slowly, head held high, but not proud, just trying to hold on to something that no longer belonged to her. Control. She walked out without another word. When the doors shut behind her, I sat back down and breathed. After the meeting, a few neighbors came up, shaking hands, patting backs, whispering thanks. But the best moment came quietly. Mrs. Alvarez, soft-spoken and small, walked over and handed me a Polaroid, an old picture, my dad in uniform, standing by our weather vane, her late husband beside him. Belly always said Glenridge was meant to be lived in, not ruled. She smiled, and I finally believed it. 2 weeks after the meeting, the weather vane creaked again. Not from storm winds, not from neglect, just a soft gust rolling over the house like an old friend returning after a long trip. I looked up and smiled. It spun easy now, not because I oiled it, but because the air was finally clear. Marjorie moved out. Rumor was she took a deal to avoid legal action and stepped down quietly before the new board elections. Her house went on the market 2 days later, and the sign didn't last long. Some corporate buyer scooped it up. I didn't care who. All I knew was the HOA wasn't a weapon anymore. The new community oversight team, run by Tyler, Doug, and Mrs. Alvarez, had already scrapped half the abusive bylaws. The decorative boulders were removed. So were the fines for mailbox height, shade of mulch, and non-regulation lawn ornaments. Ella's ramp, it stayed untouched. The helipad, officially logged with the city and approved for emergency use. But the best change? The silence. Not the fearful kind, the kind people use to avoid trouble. This silence felt like exhale, like release. Kids rode their bikes again without being barked at about curb scuffs. People waved more, stopped to chat. The place felt less like a curated museum and more like a neighborhood again. One evening, Ella and I stood by the sapling we planted, the one next to the helipad. It had already grown a few inches, just enough to catch a breeze. "You think Grandma would have liked it?" she asked. "She'd have told you to climb it the second it was strong enough." Ella giggled. "And Grandpa?" I smiled. "He'd have said it was a good start, and then made us build another shed." She nodded like that made perfect sense. Later that night, I walked back out alone. The moon hung high, the house behind me was dark and quiet, save for the soft glow of Ella's nightlight filtering through the window. I stood on the helipad, right in the center, and looked out at the sky. Not waiting for a helicopter this time, just appreciating what it meant. Because here's the thing, they'd tried to trap us with rules. They boxed us in with regulations, citations, warnings, hoping we'd fold. But what they didn't understand is that you can't fence in a man who knows how to build a way out, especially when that way is up. Legacy isn't something you inherit, it's something you defend. My father taught me that with blueprints and stubborn hands. My mother taught it with handwritten notes and quiet strength. And now, Ella would carry that forward. Not just with memory, but with proof. The arrow still pointed north. The weather vane still spun. And Marjorie's clipboard? Long gone. Ellie blocked the road, so I cleared the sky. They tried to bury us in policy. We built a runway with it instead. That's the thing about justice. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just lands exactly where it's needed. Have you ever had to stand up to an HOA or fight for your home in a way no one saw coming? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Let's show others they're not alone. You can take your power back. One step, one document, one helipad at a time.